Good day, mate. Today I'm going to discuss a chess game I just played against Josekarka, which has a lower rating compared to me. I've been experiencing using bird opening, which is f4, which means it's a very weak opening if you are playing against grandmasters. But it's a good practice, so you sort of understand the concept of the game of chess itself. So it's interesting here because um, white opens up with e4, so I can't really do it straight away. So instead of doing the bird's opening, which is in my case this is f5 as black, I didn't do it because if I do open with f5, I'm vulnerable to the attack by the queen, so I didn't want to mess that up. Instead, I reverse the variation of that thing, so I just open with c5 first to make sure that it is safe and sound to begin with. So it's been fun. I've been trying to do bird opening for every single game I've tried, but I I filter my opponents based on the rating because I don't want to lose against people who are more experienced against it. And of course, it's a good way to sort of just have fun. Um, so here I did c5 and then knight goes to f3, of course trying to control the center of the board, and then I open with e6 here with the continuation of course of f5. Now knight goes to c3, so double knights trying to control the center of the board, and then of course f5. I'm continuing this, and according to the Stockfish engine, it's a mistake. Of course, it's now not the age of Stockfish anymore. It's Alpha Zero, and Alpha Zero is more aggressive. Of course, it's more intelligent. It's more sacrificial, and Stockfish is just way below it. So I don't really believe in this engine saying it's a mistake. Of course, E takes f5, taking that, and then E takes f5 as well. It says it is inaccurate, but I don't really believe in that as well. D4 here, probably just trying to control the center more. Knight goes to f6, and then bishop g5, which is trying to pin the knight. Of course, I'm not afraid of it. Instead of being afraid, I just use my pawn at c to take d4, because if I don't take this one and the next move of white is taking that pawn at c5, I will be overwhelmed in the center while I'm trying to protect the king. For example, at square e7, it's gonna be a bit crowded. So instead of getting myself too crowded, I just do c takes d4 and then queen takes d4 here, which is interesting, probably just to try to clear the space for white king to castle queen side. But later on I can sort of counterattack, and let's just have a look there. So queen is in the center. It's not hyper modern. I think it's just a classical tactic and I don't like it. um, we can just try to kick the queen back using the knight goes to c6, and here queen goes to e3 check. I don't like this queen to e3 check, but I can sort of deflect it. So queen goes to e7, trying to cover that. Bishop takes f6. Of course, I take the queen first. Queen takes e3 check. Here, king take that king's pawn. Take the queen back, which is f takes e3, and then of course I have to take the bishop back, so the material will balance. G takes f6. From here, castling queenside, and how does black attack from this position? I can only think of one move, which is a5, and then trying to march the pawn forward. Try to um, of course make white a bit confused, because the pawn march is actually the most interesting part of the game if your opponent is castling queenside, because it's it's sort of you trying to exploit the weakness. There is an extra pawn there, and of course there is a whole, like, there are two space there, and it's not really safe and protected. So you will try to sort of push it down there. So bishop goes to b5 here, trying to, of course, attack the king, trying to extray the king. Now rook goes to g8, and I believe it is like a mistake here, because of course knight goes to d5, and there is a threat of forking, either by going to c7 or by taking f6, and there will be a fork between the king and the rook, either moves. And of course I was scared, because I might lose material now, but simply by moving my king to d8, it's actually square, because white actually doesn't really have anything to do here. So knight still takes f6 there, and then I take g2, which is a quite good compensation, I believe, because it's pretty strong. It's on the second rank, and it's trying to attack king on that way, on that side. So bishop goes to take c6 now, which is I believe it is not a good move, because if you do this, of course I will take back, and I will take it using my b pawn, because that's the only thing I can do. And as you can see from here, there is a semi-open file, which is B file or B column, semi-open column, and I will use this to exploit white weakness, because a semi-open column, or an open column, is, or open file, as people say it, is actually a very dangerous area of attack, and you will sort of place your rook or your queen there, because it's a very interesting place to get power, or get your position with. It is like you're trying to build an attack directly to your opponent without any pawn hindering you. It's a very interesting theory, especially in hypermodern chess, that you will attack a long range. Basically, you put your major pieces behind your pawns or at the back, and then all of a sudden the opponent is actually shocked, because actually your major pieces are actually already aiming for that uh, long range target, and all of a sudden it's all under fire. So all right, so after b takes c6, what does white do? Of course white here want to do some more move or attack, but actually it's deflecting its knight to h7, which is a very weak square, I believe. I don't really like to put my knight usually in the on the sides of the board, because it doesn't really cover a lot of squares, and it can be easily trapped. But of course, to gain some material, one pawn, yeah, it's sort of compensable. But look at this, I do bishop goes to h6, and now the pawn at e3 is pinned, and the idea is, of course, to exploit this weakness, and try to find a way to attack white. By this time, I suppose I'm down by 1 pound, or maybe 2 pounds. So what do I have in compensation? Do I have tempo? Do I have better position? I believe I can make use of this position, and I can sort of exploit the weakness of the open file, semi-open file B file, and I believe this is a good area of attack, or good tempo, that I can sort of utilize before I I lose the material advantage. So now, how does black protect the pawn at e3? Yeah, there are two ways, I believe. And the first way is moving the one rook, and the other way is moving the other rook. And of course, white choose one of the rook, which is now it's rook from D goes to E1, and it's a pretty strong move because from here it's just not really easy to do anything. If I move my pawn from F5 to F4, it's not going to happen because the pawn will stop there and the attack will be not strong enough. Now instead I move my pawn to A4. This is like it's an annoying move I believe for white, because if I move my pawn to A4 and then it keeps marching to A3, and then it will annoy, of course, white defense. Do you remember that white actually has the knight defending everything at C3, and then it has already marched to A7 because it's trying to attack. It's trying to attack me, but actually it's deflected to the side of the board, which is not really strong, and you don't want your knight to be at the side of the board there. Why? But yeah, of course, because if your knight is at the side of the board, it only covers less squares of attack. You want your knight to be in the middle of the board, so it's really strong, and especially if if you make an outpost of the knight, it will be much better. So here knight goes to E5. It is an interesting move because of course the idea is going to F7, and by going to F7 it means that there will be a fork between the knight, the king and the bishop, and of course I just want to avoid this. But how do I avoid this? I simply move my bishop to G7. Because I moved my bishop to G7, you can see that it's actually X-raying the pawn at B2. And the pawn at B2 is actually pretty weak because it can be attacked if any pawn at C move, or simply I move my rook from A to B. So it's pretty interesting at the moment. So black has a better position, I believe. And here knight goes to F7. It continues with the plan, which is considered a blunder by the Stockfish engine, which I don't really care about the engine anyway. I just have to move my king, and I just move it to, of course, E7. And then from here, of course, white has to defend the knight. So in this case, instead of moving the knight, yeah, the knight from H goes to G5, and now I can launch my attack, which is rook goes to B8, and then it's a strong attack. I can simply take the pawn at B later on. C3 is moved here, which is a blunder because it forgets that there is a rook at the second rank, and then of course my rook can take it. So rook at B takes B2, and then it's almost over, I believe. And from here H4. There is no more chance to avoid the checkmate. From here is mate in 4 actually. I simply do take this one. Rook takes A2. So mate in 3, and then king has to move. It's a forced move to B1. If king doesn't move, the next move is rook goes to A1, and it's checkmate. Any other rook moves will be taken by the other rook at G. So king goes to B1, and then of course bishop takes C3, and then rook is just wasting time, d1, and then that's a checkmate. So that's a 24 move game, and I believe the lesson of the game is actually trying to attack your opponent using a hyper modern theory. It is focusing all your major pieces to your kings, your opponent's king, and trying to deflect enemies major piece to the side of the board, trying to match the pawn so it annoys the opponent. It all, mixing all of this together, becoming a composition and a beautiful composition of the game. So thanks for watching, and that's my wife's singing. She can sing well, and of course she doesn't really like chess a lot, and she tries to put some songs in the middle from the baby's toys. And I hope you enjoy this video, and I'll see you later. Bye.